Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, staff, team. So the last Thursday, you all were handed a document, the city's draft economic development plan. This presentation is essentially a summary of that plan. And just real quick, I chose this theme, which is four individuals in a rowboat, because while I was up in Atlanta.
Aren't you glad he told us that?
Yeah, I know it's a bit small right now. But while I was up in Atlanta for a conference for economic developers, the theme of the conference was economic development is a team sport. And we've done a lot of outreach, and many of the folks that we met with sort of agreed with that same type of approach. So I thought it was kind of fitting. So what have we been doing? I'll spend a little bit of time just kind of giving you a little bit of background of how much work we've put into this and what's been going on. First off, we've been collecting data. Kevin from RMA has been a huge asset, helping collect a lot of the basic economic data that includes things like employment rate, capacity of commercial space, residential space, industrial uses, and things like that. To give us sort of an idea of what our city looks like from an economic standpoint. And then what we did is we took that data and we compared it with the folks that are actually in the business on a regular basis. And what the data told us was essentially that we need to increase the amount of usable commercial space in our city, that we can capture a lot of the jobs and by creating more residential in our city, because we have a tremendous amount of people that come in, work, and then leave. And then it also said that updating our industrial space is critical to attract a diversified workforce, for manufacturing and things like that. So when we took that data and we went to the folks that do business in the city, it was local land brokers. These are the folks that are essentially putting businesses in our local spaces, on Clematis Street or wherever throughout the city. And we asked them what their thoughts were. And for the most part, they agreed. They thought that we are filling up, that their information said the same thing. We also took ideas from business owners and residents, and we got a tremendous amount of good feedback. And a lot of those ideas are in the plan. Folks from the south end and the north end, the NVT, the North End Visioning team, gave quite a bit of input into this. And then also organizational representatives, folks from BDB and plans and organizations like that, and wrote the plan. And that's what we've been working on for the last few months. So today we're just going to go over 5 points, show you what the resources are, the two big highlights in the plan, which are the goals and incentives, a plan to fund the program, and then how we're going to make it happen. So today I asked some of our resources, which are in the room with us today, to join us. Our CRA and DDA they have methods in place to vet a lot of the programs that are presented in the plan, and they've been doing it for a while, and they're very successful. The HCD, the CDBG, has dedicated funds set aside to the tune of about $375,000 that they have to be used in certain designated places. The BDB is bringing us opportunities on a regular basis. The Chamber of Commerce is just a great asset and tool that we can use to help market the city. The Economic Council is constantly looking for ways to help us out from a policy standpoint. And then lastly, SCORE and the Small Business Development Center help small businesses sort of give them a little bit of mentorship, some guidance when they're looking to expand or grow, and they're used quite frequently. So we have some great resources. And then lastly, I thought about this morning, is our educational institutes. The PBAU, the Northwoods, these are also going to be great resources and partners as we move forward. So the plan has 10 goals in it, and these are not, they're all important. I know they are numbered 1 through 10, but they're all equally important, and they're numbered essentially for organizational purposes. So number one, the sustainability and credibility. This is basically knowing what's happening in our city and realizing the trends and being responsive to our businesses. And by having an idea and knowing what's happening in our city and being responsive to it, just gains the city as a credible source for economic development. Over here is a map that we've developed to segment the city into 4 areas of economic development. There's going to be a method to target industries based on clusters, and those clusters are in these different parts of the city. Real estate and development. The city owns a significant amount of land, and those lands are going to play a key part to the tune. Right now we have about, I think, $7 million worth of available lands for sale. Business retention and expansion is going to be where our growth comes from. Majority of job creation comes from the businesses that are already here. New business recruitment, partnering with the BDB, and just doing what we can to have shovel-ready parcels and market the city to recruit new businesses in those targeted sectors. Small business development and entrepreneurship, it's actually a targeted industry, but it's also a goal because we need to be able to home grow new businesses in our city, because those tend to, once they grow here, they stay here. And just creating that spirit of entrepreneurship in the city. Workforce development, talent is always the biggest challenge for any economic developer. When I was up in Atlanta, that was the common theme amongst all jurisdictions. Branding and marketing, we have a great initiative underway that'll be done here shortly in June for our branding and marketing campaign. We actually have already kicked off a little bit of it if you've seen our advertisements in Florida Trend magazine. And then lastly, having a strong incentive program, which I'll go into right now. So these are the list of incentives that we have outlined in the plan. And I'll just go through each of them quickly to give you a quick idea of what they are. The building improvement grant just builds on our facade program, where we can give a grant for both interior and exterior improvements in our commercial and industrial space. QTI is matching grants that we do with the state of Florida for targeted industries. Those are usually high-paying jobs. Local targeted industries, if there's something that the city wants to grow but necessarily doesn't fall into that QTI category, we can offer our own incentives. New Office Development Accelerator Grant is essentially our big bazooka. This is where we can dedicate a significant amount of dollars to perhaps build a building or something that would help locate a big corporate headquarters. This would be something like to the tune of a minimum of about $5 million. Historic property tax abatement we're currently using, and this is sort of a secret that I think we need to sort of share a little bit more, being able to abate those improvements for historic structures. Economic development tax exemption is something that we could put on the ballot, but it needs to be approved by the voters, where we could essentially exempt taxes for a period of time for a corporation. Public-private partnerships, our bike share is a great example of this, where we could add amenities that will be attractive to growing businesses in our city. Transfer development rights is a way to offer density, which most of you are familiar with, to help create capacity. And then lastly, a lot of times we have space in our city where, not so much by building extra buildings, but also sort of shifting the players around the city would create the space that's needed. So the commercial capacity grant would be a tool that we could use along with some sophisticated landlords to help move companies around and shift them perhaps through different locations to actually create the space needed. Now, these incentive programs are going to need some type of funding mechanism, and I've looked at different ways that we could fund this program and our strategies. These are some of the options that we could use. The CRA is doing incentives right now along with the CDBG funds. In addition, there are some, as the CRA pays back money to the city that it's borrowed, we could recycle those funds, and then also using a percentage of selling of our lands, and then also the business tax receipts could also be a funding source. Now, The proposal that I came up with utilizes what's two sources that are already existing. That's the CRA and the CDBG funds. Now, using a percentage of the sale of lands and the business tax receipt would get us a little bit over the $1 million that I think we would need over the period of 4 years, dedicating about $1 million each year in a fund that could be used for economic development. How we would use these funds, we would essentially break them up into the different areas of the city. The first area, the Central Business District, which is essentially our downtown, and the north end are the areas where the CRA is. And so if you take that $1 million from the CRA that is currently being used and break it up into those two areas, that's where we would have to use those funds, and that's why they're outlined both to the tune of about $500,000. Now, the remaining amount of money could be used in the areas that don't have the CRAs, which is the South Dixie Corridor and the western portion of the city. So implementing the program, we're currently underway with a couple of our goals. First off, meeting with businesses and being that responsiveness is something that's happening regularly. I'm out there trying to stay in touch with our local businesses, find out what they need, what their plans for growth are, and what the future might hold for them and how the city can help. There's a lot of projects underway, and if all of these were to come to, well, actually, even if a couple of these were to come to fruition, these different projects, the city's looking at least 100 jobs, 100 new jobs coming into the city, which I think is a great sign. And you can see next to them, I put the area which they fall into, the targeted industry that they fall into. And then lastly, the branding and marketing campaign that's due in June, it meets goal number 9. Now, the proposed targeted industries based on the data that we've collected show that our clusters center around finance, they center around the marine industry, they center around medical, and then the piggy bank incorporates small business development and then also the antique row and retail components as well. Those are two big targeted industries that we can continue to augment and help grow. How the incentives will work, like I said, the BDB has a great process by which they vet companies. The DDA and CRA also use the same sort of methods in order to make sure that the companies are for real. We would just simply use those processes, not recreate the wheel, and employ those into the different areas around the city where the CRA may not exist. Any large incentive dollars would come back to the commission, obviously, for approval. Building in some accountability, the mayor's asked me to put together an economic advisory board, and this advisory board could act as the oversight, or will act as the oversight of the plan to make sure that we're meeting our goals on a regular basis. And then reporting the progress to the commission on perhaps a quarterly or annual basis as the commission sees fit. So the whole idea with this plan is essentially to build in, more so than anything, is to be flexible, because we don't know where the jobs are going to go. And the more flexible that the city can be, but still make sure that each area is receiving some type of economic development stimulus is going to be crucial. Our document and our plan will be a living document that will grow as we move forward, because as trends change and needs change, the city's going to need to be flexible and sort of change the economic development plan to reflect as the city grows. So with that.
Questions, Commissioner Mitchell.
Thanks. Chris, can you,
You're on.
can you go back to that last slide?
Sure.
What does incentives exceeding $25,000 without process would come to commission?
If there isn't some way that they're already being vetted, but really, I mean, anything exceeding 25,000 would probably need to come to the commission anyways.
I was going to say, I think
yeah.
they already
Right.
do, so I wasn't sure without process. So everything under 25,000 could be administratively
Correct.
granted?
What other questions, Commissioner Materio?
Chris, this was a really good presentation. Thank you very much. I know you put a lot of time and effort into this. What my question is that if you can go back to the slide that shows the way that you're going to the 1.575 million and how it's going to be divvied up. So my question here would be, I can easily see how the CRA areas and the Northwest Broadway, Northwood Corridor areas could target specific ways of spending that money, because they've already had a charrette. There's conversations that have long going with the CRA. They have a 5-year plan. You know, they have actions that they have to take. They know where they want to go and how they want to get there. But South Dixie, Western West Palm Beach hasn't had that kind of a long-range conversation. Although we do have the Dixie Highway Implementation Committee, and I know they're about to launch they're about to present their findings. And I appreciate all the work, and I don't mean to say that it was valuable and information. They're not professionals in the planning field, and I would like to see how are you going to drill down on what specific, because really $285,000 is not a lot of money.
Right.
I mean, if I was bringing it home a year, it would be, but to put it into South Dixie Corridor is very little. So to get the most bang for your buck, I'd really like to see or know who is going to develop a plan for all of the other areas, South Dixie, Western, West Palm.
Well, I'll answer that, Chris. One of the things we did say to you is that we would engage RMA for the South Dixie Highway to do that independently, not as part of the CRA.
So,
but
I'm
to
sorry,
do-
will you say that again, Mayor?
Well, one of the things we've talked about, and I think we've made clear to you, is that we would use RMA to do a similar charrette for the South Dixie Highway. So I think we're just waiting for a report from the committee, and then we're going to take that and talk to RMA and see what we can do to build on that along South, focusing on South Dixie.
Okay, and since you answered the question, I'll take it to the next step then, because I appreciate that. I do remember that conversation about RMA, and it's one of the things I'm looking forward to working with them on. However, is the $285,000 funding that? So there's that piece of it has to take up. I mean, I would say that's a pretty chunky study that needs to be done
Right.
financially.
We haven't figured out yet how we're going to fund it, but
Okay.
I was not thinking that this would be used for that.
So, okay, so they would come up with the 30,000-foot level. This is what we want to see in a certain period of time, and then we could start implementing by plugging in that money.
Yeah, and I think, just to say to all of you, this is a first stab at funding the incentives. We would love to hear your opinion on whether you think it's enough. Do we need to look at other funding sources? What other options would you like us to consider? And however, $285,000 or whatever, it's not a lot. So, we would
Is
have
that
to.
a year?
That's
Yeah.
1 year. But I do need to say that's for this year, because the CDBG funds are that's not going to be the same amount next year, or I'm not guaranteed that it's going to be the same amount next year. So an ongoing funding source is something that needs to be addressed.
Right, and I think we all need to think about that, and we've looked at what other cities do, and we can bring some examples to you of what other cities do, but this is going to get us through the first year, and then, hopefully, as we see our budget numbers picking up over the next couple of years, we'll be able to fund this at a different level, or look at other sources. Commissioner Robinson is next.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Thank you for bringing that slide back, because I'm comfortable so far with your proposals and plan, but there are a couple of pieces of puzzle that I am finding missing in your second bullet point there. I'm going to be specific between Banyan and 59th Street. Northwest Broadway and Northwood is in the
That does include Pleasant. It does include Pleasant City too.
But hang on a minute, you
Okay.
if you say the Broadway corridor, I'm going to assume that Pleasant City is in, but you are leaving out the one area that we have totally disrespected, cut out, and don't care about. But we have spent a whole lot of money on the Stolen Lee report. Ziskovich has come up with some ideas. So when I go from Banyan to 25th Street, and I'm going up the Coleman Park corridor because that's an area, Mayor, that we had some extensive work on, and it's a little bit different, and it's much easier because Stolen Lee identified pockets of areas 19th to 21st. Along the historic Northwest, they did corridors. And instead of building and generating brand new industries, they recommended our looking to bring on small businesses, mom and pops. That's what's going to revitalize the historic from Banyan up to Palm Beach Lakes, along the Rosemary corridor and the Tamron corridor. But when you hit that Tamron corridor from 15th Street up to 25th Street, there are not areas for everything in there. But the 19th Street corridor is one, 19th and 20th. Stolen Lee and Gladding recommended the 17th and 18th Street corridor. And as you definitely know, the corridor of 20 from Lincoln Park, Lincoln Road up to 25th. It's not in there, and it would not take that much funding. Now, we're in luck in the Coleman Park because right now it looks like, Mayor, we're developing through your guidance, that western side of Tamron is really booming. If you ride down there now and look at what's now, and look at what was there in January, you won't believe it. But it is the eastern side of Tamron where the commercial pockets, Ziskovich, Stolen Lee looked at what happened in New Orleans and in Houston, just pockets of small mom and pops. And I would think that that need to be included in there. So when you say the historic Northwest, Banyan to, let's go, Banyan to 15th Street, I gotta remember you guys expanded it. But when you do Broadway, I take Broadway all the way up, Northwood, etc. But you're leaving at that area that I think is
Well, I don't
critical
think, I don't
to
think
me.
I don't think it was left out. I think as we talked about Broadway, Northwest.
And I think really in this plan, I think this is why I'm saying, raise my comfortability level. I'm in agreement. But now if I sat in the community out there and I saw that, and I lived in that neighborhood, and I was part of the Coleman Park Neighborhood Association who have been fighting diligently, as the mayor and I know, and all of us know, identify. That's what I'm saying.
Sure.
Let's put them in the hopper. Don't leave them out there and let them think that we're going to get to you when it comes. Down south, I'm in agreement. I'm totally in agreement with you on that south corridor. We need to do something along that South Dixie corridor to boom and go from Waterway to 59th Street, from the Waterway on the east to State Road 7 on the west. And unfortunately, I've taken off my binders, but I want to be inclusive. So to help me out and make me feel comfortable, plug in that one little simple name, Coleman Park, because I can't let that neighborhood be left out.
Will do.
We'll add it. What other questions are there? Commissioner Mitchell? Oh, did you have a question? I'm sorry, I didn't know. Go ahead.
I appreciate this, and I read through the material you gave us on Thursday, and I noticed that you do talk about home ownership, which I really am glad you do, and you talked about it through policy and incentives. So I don't know what you're thinking about as far as that goes, but I know that the idea of the North End having the CRA expanded might be something we could consider, because then if we have an umbrella of hope there for the houses that have, we have so many foreclosed, abandoned houses, and we have now people who are speculating and buying huge numbers of properties, and not so much in good faith, I think. So we need to look at that, and I wondered if you'd thought about policy, or you want us as a commission to come forward with policy and incentives to try to change that.
For home ownership,
Yes.
I think we're off to a pretty good start. I mean, for instance, the historic tax abatement is a great tool, and I think that if we can expand on that, especially in those areas of the city, because that's where our historic houses are, that's a great tool. And I know when I've shared it with folks looking for homes, they were like, I didn't even know this exists. This is such a great asset. That's one. The landlord training program, I think, is a step in the right direction, because of just sort of encouraging the accountability in the community and things like that, and getting those good tenants that will probably be a stepping stone to home ownership. As they come in, they rent, and then they go ahead and get some type of home ownership. Our chronic nuisance, just saying that, hey, we're not going to, you can't just simply let your home get derelict. All of those type of things are sort of a good starting point, and then moving from there. I mean, there's some things that we can do, looking at perhaps some federal programs and stuff like that. But for the most part, I think we're off to actually a pretty good start with encouraging home ownership in the city.
Thanks. Can I follow up with another question, please? I wonder how the use of business tax receipts, I like that idea. I thought that maybe the planning was under the enterprise zone concept, and if we wanted to use business tax receipts, would we have to change something for that?
I can check with the law department, but for the most part, the business tax receipts go into the general fund.
Okay.
So we can, as far as I know, we can use those, for economic development.
That's a great idea. And I also, the final question was, I like the idea of an economic advisory board, and is it going to be are you thinking much like other boards in the city, people would apply and then be accepted and it would be a voluntary board, or are you thinking about something else?
It would definitely be a voluntary board, and
We've targeted some particular business sectors that we would like to see on the board, and actually some particular people as well.
Thanks.
We'll have to figure out how to set that up. Commissioner Mitchell?
Yeah, that one is going to be tricky, because if people serve on boards, then they are,
Hard.
it makes it much harder for them. Typically, the people who serve on boards that we want to serve on boards are also
Conflicted.
involved and working in the community, and then they get conflicted. It's like trying for the county to get members on the planning board. It became really difficult because of the new ethics rules. I'd like to ask a couple of questions, but I'd like to speak to your question, Commissioner Moffett, on the home ownership, and especially in the north end. I think that getting a handle on a lot of the homes right now, it's not, yes, there is a problem with investors coming in, but what investors are not doing is coming in, fixing up the houses so that they are in a condition that a lot of people would want to either rent or own, the kind of families and individuals that we actually want. So it's not just getting the houses, it's making sure that the houses have upgraded electrical and closets where, more than 2 pairs of shoes will fit. And I think in order for us to get there is going to be a partnership. So when you talked about public-private partnerships and pointed to, the bike share program, I think what we also need to be doing is finding on a significant level, because we don't have, even if we went into reserves, we just don't have a lot of money. The city itself doesn't, to go in and assemble more than 10 homes. But when you turn around, and we've done that, we don't really move the needle that much. I mean, for 10 families we do, and that's great. But if we want to use this as a tool to really strengthen the north end and strengthen pockets in the city where we've got higher foreclosures, I think the genius is going to come in finding the right kinds of partnerships to help us get there. So then I have one more question.
Go ahead.
On this slide, what does CBD stand for?
Central Business District.
Okay, so you're talking about the downtown except for the northwest neighborhood? What do you consider the CBD?
Right here, this.
So let's just call it the Central Business District. not the, there's a lot of CDBG,
Yes, yeah.
RFP.
Sorry. Yeah, alphabet soup.
C.
WXY.
Yeah, it's easier if we actually, because anybody who's listening, so they can follow what it is that we're talking about as best they can.
Sure.
So what do you consider the central business district?
The Central Business District essentially goes up to Palm Beach Lakes and south to Okeechobee Boulevard, and it runs along Australian Avenue. And then the east side is, of course, the Intercoastal.
Okay, so when we talk about the historic Northwest neighborhood, that's Banyan to Palm Beach Lakes.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so is that,
They
So
got-
we've got
There's some
north-
overlap. There's some
Okay.
overlap. What I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure, to Commissioner Robinson's point, is to really know that no segment of the city is really being left out. To say that, we're targeting areas like the Northwest, we're targeting areas, and Coleman Park is a great example, that, these are all places that we want to make sure, we're gonna put efforts there.
well, we have been putting efforts there. I'm not sure, I really still don't understand why there are some folks who don't think that we have, paid attention and made commitments into Coleman Park. I know it's not directly inside the CRA, but we have used CDBG funds, we've used what are they? SP1, NSP1, NSP2.
I think we've invested over $10 million in Coleman Park. So
Right.
to say that we've ignored them is wrong.
Right, I think
Thank you
that
for saying that.
that we have, and what we've struggled with is, there's a lot of places outside of a CRA that don't get the additional funding to make all kinds of improvements, and the South End is one of them because we don't go south. And we want to be careful that, anytime we expand the CRA, while it seems like that's going to be helpful, it can also be harmful. There are repercussions from being considered slum and blight, I believe. I wouldn't want to be living in a neighborhood that's been deemed slum and blight, actually. So here's the bigger question, and that is, when we talk about coming up with a plan, what we've done in the past is CRA dollars have been pretty much divvied up in the two different CRAs. And we haven't applied anything else to other parts of the city, including the western communities. So when we say West Palm Beach, we're talking everything west of 95 generally?
West of Australian Avenue.
Oh, okay, that's even further east.
Yeah.
Okay. And we haven't done anything in the south end. So if we go back to, here's the bigger question. When you say CDBG funding, you're not sure what that dollar amount's going to be? We don't have any general idea?
Next year. I tried to get a rough idea from the H.
We have our allocation for next year. I saw it was 800 and.
Okay.
Right,
And if
then.
we looked back historically, is that about how much we get every year?
Last couple of years. It went down a couple of years ago, but the last couple of years it's been around 800, 850.
Okay. And so I would say it might dip and it might go up, but it's not going away. I think the federal government recognizes how important this grant especially is to small cities, medium, and large-sized cities. So does anybody foresee it going away? I mean, you all spend time with the league.
Yeah, I mean, it's been cut, and we've all been very active in advocating for it not being cut.
Right, well, of course.
But I believe, though, what he's referring to is the economic development component.
Component of it.
There you
This
go.
year, we have 375 for commercial facade. So next year, we'll be coming back to you and decide how much of that 800 you'd like to allocate to commercial facade.
So we're-
Okay,
and
so
we're
are we allowed, once that pot of money is allocated to us, the city gets to make the decision over it, we could put it all into economic development if we wanted, right?
And how do we remind you that H in HUD means housing?
It means
They-
housing.
Okay.
They have said
I
that
They
know
to
have
us.
It
said
means
that.
housing.
So it
I
is,
know what
yes.
the H stands for, but but I also know that what the community development stands for. So, what is their policy on that? Does
Well,
it have to be a 50-50 split? Do we
No,
know?
there is something called a substantial amendment. We have to get public input. And what
I'm
we've
not
been doing is.
suggesting that we do, but I'm just asking, could we? I mean, what
You
are the
could decide
parameters?
how much, as long as you meet the objectives of the program.
Okay.
So the plan was to bring it back to you after we have done some community input as to how much you'd like to go in the different categories.
Community input by, what do you mean?
Under the federal regulations,
Yeah.
for the substantial
No,
amendment,
but
you
when you
must
say
have
community input, what do you mean by that? Do we have
having public meetings.
But do we have a plan right now of proposed projects that we'd like to talk about?
No.
Okay. Well, what I think before we even take it to the community is that we should have a conversation
Okay.
amongst us to say, generally, what direction do we think is going to be good? And then hear from the public, do they like this, or is there a different approach? But I'd like to see it before it just kind of
Okay.
gets tossed out there, so that we give it a little bit of guidance.
I think that's a
Okay.
good idea. Yeah, that's a
We'll
good
bring it
idea.
back.
Anything
will.
else about,
Comment.
anything else about the economic development plan? Commissioner
Right
Matera?
here. Ready?
Oh, go ahead.
I did.
About the economic development plan.
Economic development. I'm going to have to address my Commissioner Mitchell's comment. We made a conscious decision a few years ago while two of us were here to take CBG funding and help revitalize an area that we allowed to become in a condition. I really would like to have more. NSP 1.3, we know where that money is. But I'm not talking about, this is apples and oranges to me. I'm looking at economic development. We're making a tremendous stride in our housing, NSP funding, NSP 3, and helping to revitalize that area. But to me, this is that little other domino effect coming in. This is economic development. And I'm looking at it because we have already spent quite a bit of money. Still, I'll go back to Thaddeus Cohen. It blew my mind that Thaddeus Cohen in 1950 identified some of the same conditions along in our corridor from Banyan to 25th as Sterling Lee identified. And Gladding and Jackson, we hired to make sure that Sterling Lee didn't lie to us. And they convinced them it's the same thing. I'm talking about economic development. I'm really appreciative of what, but we made that cognizant decision to create a buffer and improve, and I'm really happy. That's something that we're going to get better at when we get the people involved in helping us, because I keep telling them, we can't do everything over there. You guys got to get out of those houses and help us police those streets over there. But this is economic development. And economic development for that corridor are the small businesses, mom and pops. We've identified the area. It blew my mind. I took Sterling Lee and Thaddeus Cohen and Gladding and Jackson and put them together, and I'd be doggone if they didn't almost did. Their findings were the same. So it is not. I'm appreciative of that, but this is economic development.
Right.
Historic Northwest, a lot of us think that it stops at Palm Beach Lakes, even me, before I took my head out of the sand. 1996, we expanded the Historic Northwest. I take that back. That city commission expanded it to 15th Street because that's where the historic African American community was. So the Historic Northwest goes from Banyan all the way up to 15th Street, which is outside of the CRA 15 there.
Right.
But from 15th north, there is nothing. Only thing that's up there was the brownfield. So the mayor, well, when we were on the commission, the mayor, you and I, decided to look at that area and see if we could help jumpstart them living condition-wise. We're getting there. We're not where we want to be. But right now, economic development is what I'm looking at. Where would our little mom and pops and small businesses go? I doubt if the marine industry is going to locate in that along the historic Northwest, but a lot of mom and pops may. So I'm looking, will they be in the hopper also, so that we can help the community revitalize? The Tamron Corridor, Spruce Corridor, Sapodilla, Rosemary. See, these are the areas that I'm looking at. But we've done a lot in there, and I think that, like you, I take a lot of heat because my community tell me what we haven't done, and I give them, and I blister them. You can't do it, but I can blister them because I've been here over 50 years. And I'll tell them where we come from, where we are now, and where we came from, and what it took. And then we erase the line in the sand. I don't harp any. If you don't know, if they don't know, they don't know. 11 months, I'll keep telling them.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Mitchell, Commissioner Materio has ceded her next in line to you.
But yes, that's fine.
Well,
I'll go
Commissioner
after you.
James had a
Well, yeah, but
question.
Materio's the next one, but
Okay.
if you want to speak, she's gave me a nod that it's okay
Okay.
for you to go.
Well, then this is what I would also recommend as we go forward. When we have buildings on Tamron up in the neighborhood you're talking about, see, and the other part of it is when we talk about the historic Northwest, we're talking about it from a point of view of funding. So that's what is inside our downtown CRA. That's what I'm talking about. As far as what the community calls the historic Northwest, that's what gets a little confusing. So we're just talking about funding right now. But as we go forward, and yes, I agree, continuing to foster mom and pops in all of our business corridors is important. Then one of the things we have to stop doing, in my opinion, is putting nonprofits and community service groups on these business corridors. So when we have buildings like we have, and we've talked about like at 7th Street, we have to shy away from. We want to put commercial where real commerce is taking place and money is changing hands, and hopefully in a safe and legal way. That's the kind of thing on the business corridors. If we want to add some of the social services to the community, let's think about that, but not right on the business corridor, because it's actually taking away from what we're trying to promote.
Good point. Commissioner Materio, and then
very
Commissioner
good point.
James, and
Thank
then we're
you.
going to wrap up.
I'll make this brief. All very good points taken. I think that it's really important. This is a good start, Chris. It's a teeny little thing, but it's a very good start. And I'm always very impatient because coming from the private sector and having to make fast decisions in order to see how, because small business can't wait. Small business has to make things happen. And that's, if you're a good small business operator, you've learned how to go out there and make it happen. And if you're not able to do that, then you didn't get through the last 5 years very well. And you've had to been able to go up and down a lot of roller coaster rides and make a lot of quick stops and changes. So that said, and because we all are going to lobby for our very respective areas that we are, although we are all commissioners of the entire city, I don't really need to say that, but as a city, as I said last Thursday, what makes us strong is all of us, all of our districts and our business districts in each one of those districts. Because there have been many studies done in the past that haven't been implemented, then because we have a history, and I don't really want to relive the history, it's good to know the history, but I'd like to be able to plan on the future. I would like, at some point in time, if this commission would agree with me, to have a 1 or 2 day workshop with the different layers, because this isn't just about an economic development plan. This is about each one of our departments being able to bring to the table what their 5-year plan is, so we can overlay all of this to see where it's going. It includes everything, and a small piece of that are the city's utilities, but more important than that are Rick Green being able to say what his vision is and what his 5-year plan is for his department. And let's talk about what the Art and Public Places piece can bring to this, because there are options financially that they will also be able to plug in to help relieve some of the financial burden. I don't know when that could happen, but sooner than later.
We do have that 5-year plan, and you have it. It's called our 5-year strategic plan. So
But more than that.
Well, we've committed to reporting back to you on a quarterly basis where we are on that 5-year strategic plan.
I understand, Mayor, but what I'm talking about is drilling down further, because we all know our districts very well. We all know the kinds of businesses that are going to thrive in our individual districts. So I would like to be able to sit at the table and to have that discussion about economic development based on what we really know. And how, and maybe let's bring out dust off that Glad and Jackson report, which had very little implemented, and let's take a look, maybe we can look at them prior to a meeting, so that we can see, is there something we can learn from those old reports that were done that were not really very well implemented?
Commissioner James, and then we're going to wrap up one more.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Chris, this is an excellent job. It's an excellent beginning. Can you go back to the slide? There was a slide that showed different code names for various projects, which is very, I like the kind of, yeah. All right, so I'm a little bit, I guess, I need some clarification. We've identified how money is going to be spent in certain areas. My question is, how does whatever is being proposed for these various undercover projects, Sphere, Auto, how does the monies that are even being considered for incentive for those particular projects play into the budget that you showed us on the other side? Like $500,000, I assume these are all in the central business district or maybe the north end. How does all that play together? Sure. You understand my question?
Absolutely.
I'm a little bit confused as to the interplay.
Okay, so the first two, Sphere and Auto, were brought to us by the BDB. Those are essentially QTI requests. The Project Nostalgic is a facade or building improvement grant that we would need to look into. Project Lake, Project Lake is another capacity issue. They're looking for assistance in helping construct a building. The Project Orange and Project Palm Tree are both brand new. They have to identify a site, and we need to get a little bit more information on their needs of what they would need to locate into the city. And that's anywhere. Both of those projects are looking at the Central Business District and North End.
All right, quick follow-up, Mayor. Assuming that we pursue each of those projects, what impact would that have on the numbers that you showed us on a later slide, that 1,570,000? How much would that be decreased if we were to pursue these particular projects?
The last two, I'm not sure, because I
Okay.
don't know what they're fully asking for.
Right.
The first two, it depends on how much the city wants to match. But if we do between the two of those projects at the top, you're looking at maybe 100 jobs. So at $3,000 a job, that's what?
300,000.
300,000.
So the 500,000.
But hold on, let me
Okay.
clarify. Is that you don't pay all that out all at one time. That's over a period of time. That's the way the QTI works. As the jobs grow, the match comes in.
So that wouldn't all come out the first year? Then?
Correct. No.
Okay.
Nope.
All right, good. Okay, last question, Commissioner Mitchell.
Thanks. I would like to see if we could schedule another workshop like this, but I'd like to incorporate, our public safety and our code enforcement efforts so that we are looking strategically at where in different parts of the city, as an example, in the North End, if we don't take, this is my feeling, if we don't take a pretty cohesive look at policing and code enforcement, and, Mr. Ward and I were just having this conversation, we are going to have a hard time with economic development. It's same thing in Coleman Park, same thing in different parts of the city. So if we're not weaving in and really ahead of the conversations about incentives, I don't think we're going to get as far as we're going to want to. So I'd like to hear really from our police department and code enforcement what the collective, what their 5-year plan is. So we know what ours is, and I think, is that what you were talking about, Commissioner Materio?
Yes.
It's like, what are the other departments doing that's also, like, let's all kind of regroup to focus on where the focus is, what the focus is, and then how we can be helpful in relaying that and getting information and relaying that information.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone. Chris, thank you for the great job. I want to thank all our partners who are here today. Rafael Clemente from the DDA, John Ward from the CRA, Kelly Smallridge from the BDB, Dennis Grady from the Chamber. Am I missing anyone? No. Thank you all for being a part of this and for helping us put this together.